The shadow truth dark chosen ones are afraid to admit, even to themselves. There's a truth that lives in the silence between our thoughts. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It waits watching, knowing, patient. And for those of us who walk the path of the dark chosen ones, this truth becomes the very thing we run from, even as we seek enlightenment. We like to think we've seen it all. We like to believe we've embraced our darkness, faced our demons, transmuted our pain into purpose. But there's something deeper, something hidden beneath even the darkness we've dared to explore. And this shadow truth, it terrifies us, not because it's evil, but because it's honest. I've walked with people who claim to be awakened, who wear their trauma like armor, who speak of transcendence while still drowning in denial. And I've seen this pattern in myself. You see, we become so good at surviving hell that we turn it into home. We light candles in the abyss and call it sacred. We quote Rumi and Jung and talk about alchemy and integration, but deep down, there's a part of us that hasn't been touched by any of it. A part we avoid. A part we pretend isn't there. And that part holds the shadow truth we're afraid to admit. We are still attached to our suffering.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let that sink in. We are still attached to our pain. We identify with it. We protect it. We even romanticize it, because pain made us feel real. Pain gave us depth. Pain gave us a story, and without it, who would we be? That's the secret no one wants to say out loud. We say we want to heal, but healing would mean letting go of the drama, the victimhood, the intensity that makes us feel alive. It would mean stepping into the unknown, not just the mystical unknown, but the mundane unknown of peace. And for those of us who have lived in chaos for so long, peace is terrifying. Do you see it now? The lie we tell ourselves is that we want freedom, but what we really want is control, even over our own darkness, especially over our own darkness. But the shadow doesn't work like that. It's not here to be tamed. It's here to be acknowledged, for fully. And until we do, until we admit that some part of us still needs the pain, still feeds off the tension, still craves the identity that suffering gave us, we will never be free. I'm not speaking this from theory. I've lived it. There were times I sat in meditation for hours, thinking I was transcending ego, only to realize later that I was using spirituality to avoid the raw, unfiltered truth of my own wounds. I wasn't healing, I was hiding. Hiding behind rituals, hiding behind books, hiding behind the illusion of awakening. And every time I thought I had gone deep enough, life would rip something else away just to show me how much deeper the truth went. You see, the universe doesn't care about how enlightened we think we are. It cares about how real we're willing to be. And the realest thing you can ever do is look in the mirror and say, I'm not there yet. I still cling. I still fear. I still hide. That's where the breakthrough lies, not in perfection, not in performance, but in raw, vulnerable honesty. Here's the paradox. The moment you admit your attachment to pain, you begin to loosen its grip. Because the shadow truth isn't there to shame you. It's there to free you. But only if you stop pretending. Only if you stop performing for the world and for yourself. The dark chosen ones are not meant to be saints. We are meant to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from denying the truth we don't want to see. It comes from embracing it. So let me ask you something. Not a surface-level question, but a solvable one. If the pain disappeared today, if all your wounds healed and all your shadows dissolved, would you still know who you are? Or would you feel lost without the struggle? That question alone can change your life, if you're brave enough to answer it honestly. Because here's the thing, we talk about spiritual awakening like it's this beautiful rise into light. But sometimes it's a brutal collapse into truth. Sometimes it's falling apart so completely that nothing of the old self remains. And in that nothingness we find what's real, not the identity we built from pain, not the persona we crafted from loss, but the essence that existed before all of it. But that's what the shadow truth is trying to lead us back to. Not a better version of who we are, but the original version, unfiltered, unscarred, unafraid. But we resist. Oh, how we resist. We build entire spiritual identities around our trauma. We become wounded healers and dark mystics and shadow workers, and all of that can be beautiful unless it becomes a cage, and unless it becomes another mask, unless we use the language of healing to avoid the actual healing. And this is the hardest pill to swallow. We are often addicted to the very thing we say we want to heal. So what do? Where do we go from here? We go inward, deeper than before, past the rituals, past the mantras, past the ego that says, I've done the work. We ask the question we've been avoiding, what part of my suffering am I still holding on to, and why? And then we sit with whatever comes up. No judgment, no story, just presence. And from that place, something extraordinary happens. The shadow stops being a threat. It becomes a teacher. It shows us the places we've abandoned, the parts we've disowned, and slowly, gently, we begin to reclaim them. Not because we want to be enlightened, but because we want to be whole. The beautiful lie, how the ego masks itself as healing to keep us trapped. There is a kind of deception that is more dangerous than any external illusion. It doesn't come from the media, religions, or even other people. It comes from within us. It's quiet, clever, seductive. It wears the robes of awareness, speaks in the language of healing, and walks with the posture of humility. But underneath it all, it's the ego, dressed up like a guru. And this is the beautiful lie, the one that convinces us we are healed when we are merely performing healing. It's the ego's most brilliant trick, to hide inside our spiritual journey and make us believe that we've transcended it. We don't even notice it at first. It starts with a genuine desire to grow. We read the books, attend the retreats, do the meditations, align our chakras. We cleanse, we purge, we journal until our fingers ache. And somewhere along the way, a subtle shift happens. Without even realizing it, we begin to identify with the healing. We start to think, I'm not like them. I've done the work. I'm awake. But the moment we compare, the moment we elevate ourselves because of our spiritual progress, the ego has already taken the throne again. It's no longer about becoming free, it's about maintaining the image of someone who looks free. Let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. The ego doesn't care how spiritual you become, it just wants to survive. If it can't survive through pride, it will survive through humility. If it can't survive through dominance, it will survive through surrender. It will use any mask necessary, even the mask of shadow work, even the mask of self-love. And that's why this lie is so beautiful, because we believe it's real. We believe we've arrived. But if we're still clinging to the identity of someone who has healed, we haven't truly healed at all. We've just shifted our illusion to a higher floor. Have you ever caught yourself judging someone who's still asleep? Have you felt superior to those who are just starting their inner work? Do you secretly feel frustrated when people don't understand your depth, your sensitivity, your insight? That's not your soul speaking. That's your ego wearing a spiritual mask. And the most dangerous part, it feels righteous. It feels enlightened. But it's still separation. It's still division. It's still fear. You see, real healing is silent. It doesn't need to be declared. It doesn't need to be defended. It's invisible because it's internal. The ones who are truly free don't need to prove they're free. They don't need to post about it, preach about it, or wrap themselves in spiritual language. Their presence is the teaching. Their peace is the message. And often, they are mistaken for ordinary. Because they no longer need to be extraordinary. But the ego hates that. It wants to be seen. It wants to be admired for how much work it has done. It wants to be validated for its scars, applauded for its depth. And so, it turns healing into a performance. It turns the spiritual path into a stage. We memorize the lines, perfect the tone, even cry on cue. And before we know it, we're no longer healing, we're acting. Not because we're insincere, but because we're human. And the ego is a master of survival. The only way out of this trap is radical honesty. But not the kind that makes you look raw on Instagram. The kind that makes you uncomfortable in your own silence. The kind that strips away every label, every identity, even the identity of the healed one. That's where the real work begins. When you say, "Who am I without my pain? Who am I without my healing? Who am I when there's nothing left to fix?" That's when the ego trembles, because it knows it cannot exist in that emptiness. Only the soul can. So I ask you, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of shared experience, are you healing or are you performing healing? Are you growing or are you collecting spiritual trophies to show the world how far you've come? Are you free or are you just better at pretending? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to liberate you. Because once you see the beautiful lie for what it is, you no longer need it. You don't need to prove your evolution. You don't need to convince anyone that you're awake. You can just be. And in that being, you return to something far more powerful than any identity, presence. Real, raw, naked presence. And when you live from that place, everything changes. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You do less, but your actions ripple further. You no longer chase enlightenment, you become a space where enlightenment can emerge naturally. Not because you tried to be someone, but because you finally allowed yourself to be no one. The gift of emptiness, while losing yourself, is the first step to finding your soul. There's a secret doorway on the spiritual path, one that most people avoid, not because they don't see it, but because they fear what lies beyond. It's not lined with gold or guarded by angels. It's empty, silent, still. And that's exactly why it's powerful. Because emptiness is not the absence of life, it's the space where life truly begins. But to walk through that door, you must be willing to lose everything you thought you were. And that is the part no one prepares you for. We talk so much about finding yourself, about coming home to your truth, your essence, your light. But how can you find what's real if you're still holding on to what's false? How can you discover your soul if your hands are full of identities you created to survive this world? The truth is, the soul isn't found through addition, it's found through subtraction, through letting go, through unraveling, through surrendering everything you thought you needed just to feel worthy. I remember the moment it happened for me. I had been climbing the mountain of growth for years, meditating, fasting, journaling, purging, healing. I kept thinking, just one more breakthrough, one more retreat, one more trauma release, then I'll be whole. But every step I took made me feel heavier, not lighter. Until one day something inside me broke, not in pain, but in peace. I stopped searching. I stopped fixing. I stopped trying. And in that stillness I felt something I had never felt before: nothingness. Not numbness, not depression, just nothing. Empty, clear, free. At first it terrified me. I had built my entire identity around being someone deep, someone wise, someone spiritual. And suddenly that someone was gone. There were no more stories to tell, no more wounds to explain, no more masks to wear. I wasn't the healer. I wasn't the student. I wasn't even the seeker. I was just here. And in that moment I realized something profound. The soul doesn't need to be found, it only needs to be uncovered. It had been there all along, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the striving, beneath the self I thought I had to become. This is the gift of emptiness. It strips you bare. It takes away your costumes, your roles, your coping mechanisms, not to punish you but to reveal you. Because who you really are doesn't need to be created. It needs to be remembered, and remembrance can only happen in stillness, in the void, in the beautiful, terrifying, liberating emptiness that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You see, we fill our lives with distractions not because we're weak, but because we're afraid of that silence. We scroll, we binge, we chase achievement, even in our spirituality. But what are we really running from? The quiet, the pause, the space where nothing is happening. Because in that space we come face to face with the truth. We are not who we think we are. We are not our accomplishments, our pain, our personality, or even our healing. We are something deeper, something eternal. And that truth is too big to fit into the small containers we've built around our lives. So here's the paradox: you must lose yourself to find yourself. Not the self with a lowercase s, the identity self, but the self with a capital S, the soul, the source, the endless ocean of awareness that lives beneath the surface of your mind. And that self doesn't care about your image. It doesn't care about your past. It doesn't need validation. It simply is, always was, always will be. The only question is, are you willing to let go of what you're not to remember what you are? I want to ask you something most people never ask themselves. Who are you without your story? Who are you without your trauma, your goals, your spiritual titles? Would you still feel valuable? Would you still feel real? Or would you feel lost in the silence of your own being? That's the test. That's the sacred challenge of the awakened path. Not to become more, but to become less. To stop clinging. To stop performing. To stop seeking outside what can only be uncovered within. And when you do, when you finally stop and surrender to the emptiness, you realize it's not empty at all. It's full of truth, of peace, of presence. It's full of you, the real you, the you beyond all labels and roles. And from that place, life begins to flow differently. You no longer chase purpose, it flows through you. You no longer fear change, you become it. You no longer need to be seen, you become the one who sees. Everything slows down, and yet everything becomes more alive. Because now, you're not living from your mind, you're living from your essence. So yes, the path to the soul demands that you lose yourself. But what you find in return is worth more than anything the ego could ever offer. You find peace without a cause, love without condition, and presence without performance. This is the gift. This is the freedom. This is the truth waiting on the other side of emptiness. The final surrender. What happens when you let go of even the need to awaken? There comes a point on the spiritual path that none of the books can truly describe. It's beyond the mantras, beyond the philosophies, beyond the endless search for meaning. It's the place where even awakening itself begins to feel like another story, another identity, another grasping. After all the layers have been peeled back, after all the shadows have been faced, after all the ego games have been exposed, there is one last illusion we must release. The idea that we must become something more. The belief that we must awaken to finally be worthy, and that too must die. You see, the desire to awaken is still a desire. It's noble, yes, but even noble desires are born from the same seed of incompleteness. The moment we say, "I must awaken," we assume that we are not already what we seek. And that assumption is the very thing that keeps us spinning in circles, searching, striving, exhausting ourselves with the pursuit of truth while ignoring the fact that we are truth. Right now, as we are. This is where the final surrender begins, not in doing more, but in being less. Not in climbing higher, but in sitting still. Not in searching for light, but in realizing that light was never lost. It was only covered by the smoke of our own striving. The very effort to awaken becomes the veil. The very hunger for enlightenment becomes the distraction. And so, the last letting go must be of the journey itself. Imagine this. What if nothing more needed to happen for you to be whole? What if you didn't need another breakthrough, another sign from the universe, another deep mystical realization? What if this moment, this breath was already it? Could you rest in that? Could you allow yourself to stop trying? That's the final surrender. Letting go of the seeker. Letting go of the one who's been climbing mountains, purging wounds, chasing the divine. You lay it all down. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it's no longer needed. You've come home, not to some cosmic destination, but to you. The you that doesn't need fixing. The you that doesn't need awakening. The you that simply is. And in this surrender, something incredible happens. You begin to live not as a spiritual warrior, not as a mystic, not as a healer, but as a human being fully present in the now. You laugh more. You cry without resistance. You love without fear. You walk through life not searching for signs, but being the sign. You become the living evidence that peace is not a destination, it's who we are when we stop pretending to be anything else. This doesn't mean you'll never feel pain again. It means you'll stop fearing pain. It doesn't mean you'll never face challenges, it means you'll stop defining yourself by them. You'll live with a deep inner stillness that no circumstance can touch. Because you've let go of the last illusion that you need to become anything other than what you already are. The dark chosen ones, the seekers, the mystics, we all come to this point eventually. The final edge, the final silence, And we realize the truth that was too simple to see at the start. There is nothing to become, only something to remember. And once remembered, there's nothing left to chase. The journey brought you here. The pain, the shadow, the ego, the healing, they all played their role. But now, the play is over. You step off the stage, and you bow to the illusion, and you walk into life not as someone who is awake, but as someone who is real. And that is the end of seeking. The beginning of being, the real freedom, the final surrender.